Part 4, the pretty much actual transmission. This is the input drum for the 4L60E, 65, and 70. The only difference is really up here, and I have other videos for that. But we got a drum here, and it looks in relatively good shape. Some of the things we're going to inspect before assembly is the journal here for the front bushing and the stator. This is very, very important, and often you will find them where the bushing's kind of digging into it on a high mileage unit. Unfortunately, you need to replace it. There's no fix for it. You are able to push the shaft out if you heat the drum. You can't just push it out, it ruins the drum, or just buy a new input drum. Unfortunately, that's a very expensive fix. The journal down here, same case. This should be very, very smooth. That's for the rear stator. Some of the other things to look for is your spline area. One thing I've noticed in my career is the LS 300mm shaft that we have here wears much, much more easily than the 298mm LT shaft for the older small blocks and big blocks. I'm not sure why that is, so maybe somebody could educate me. I've always actually wanted to know. Moving around the inside of the drum here, your drum might be pretty fucked. In that, I say dirty. So usually everybody's fried a third clutch, which is gonna blow black shit everywhere. You are gonna have to scrub that out with some kerosene or mineral spirits. This drum's very nice. We have very nice casting. All the teeth are intact. You have to watch out for broken teeth. Very, very important. And everything's clean. Another thing to check that I probably can't stress enough is this little guy right here, that check ball and capsule. That check ball and capsule is your main third release for the 3/4 clutch pack. The blind bleed for it is over here. So this will initially bleed it off, and that will finish it off. That needs to be working as intended, sealing on apply and venting on release. If it is not, another reason your third clutch pack might have went. And it's a very cheap, simple repair to do. It's just a little annoying. I do want to say before we get too far, I will be mentioning the third clutch pack a lot because the circuit and every component that works with it is very large. Especially when we get to the valve body, there's a couple things in there that you never expect third gear fluid to flow through, which I will cover. Moving on. I suggest molded pistons if you do not have any. If you have an older model, some models will come with aluminum with lip seals. They work just fine for stock applications, but they are prone to more failures because of more pieces. These are molded, and it's very unlikely a lip is going to tear unless it's an install error or previous damage from a previous build. So we have your spring cage, forward piston, overrun, 3/4 apply, another return cage, and the 3/4 piston itself. We have a lube seal and a forward O-ring. They sometimes are different colors. I really suggest you go for a rubber seal. The plastic ones, watch out for people that use those or even builds that have them, because the plastic ones, they like to just shrink in the center. They're really hard from the get-go. They don't seal, and they're just kind of junk. This is lube for the rear train. It's very important. Rubber one's essential. 4 Teflon sealing rings for the input shaft. I prefer solid in this instance. On a lot of other things, I prefer scarf cut. This is kind of your preference. A lot of things do work, and this is just my opinion. So, building the drum, we're going to flip this over and stick it in a hole of some kind. The first thing I want to put in is the green forward O-ring. Okay, the green forward O-ring is forward gears, and the forward clutch pack is the most important clutch pack with the sprag, because the forward clutch pack is on all the time as soon as you basically start the vehicle. The sprag then free rolls or locks depending on the gear that's needed to be made, namely reverse and fourth, where it would freewheel, and every other gear it's locked. Just so we don't forget, your lube seal just pushes into those splines nice and easy, and we have our green O-ring around the base down there. Now this is where you might want to be a little generous with the lube, because you're going to grease up this entire centerpiece to prevent any tearing or tearing of the green O-ring, which is very, very easy to do. We have a lot of ledges to go over, and any little bit helps. Don't worry, you're not going to clog your holes up, your feed holes or anything like that. You're just really preventing any installer error whatsoever. Now we're going to move out of the drum and come on to the pistons, because part of these have to be installed out of the drum. One thing that we want to basically, in order, install is your 3/4 piston or third clutch piston. We'll put a little grease around it, in and out, and we will drop this into the drum. And it should be a very tight, firm fit. It should not go in hard or difficult or pinch on one side. It should just be nice and firm. Okay, show that again. Sometimes a little twist helps. It should go in very easy with very little pressure. Now the next part is the 3/4 ply and your return spring along with the forward piston assembly. So the forward piston assembly, you're going to grease this inner land, make sure your check ball is working. Grease this inside land. This is where the danger of the forward O-ring being clipped, which is a common mistake, can be done. Don't be scared of the grease in this instance. It's better to have a little too much than not enough. Now, this is a little finesse. We simply bring it in, give it a little twist, and it should just pop in. Nice and easy. No torn lip, nice seal. Let's show that again. Whoop. Easy done. And it should be very tight. This piece we now place on top of our return cage with the fat tabs for the forward clutch and overrun to line up with our crown here. Thin tabs in the middle. Now we pick this piece up and we set it, gently guiding it down till it rests. Let the 3/4 ply drop, and there is a tool for this. I'm not using it today because it's not too hard to really succeed at this. It's kind of hard to mess up unless you're rough. It's a cone that goes over the center, prevents the tearing of this. If you've done everything right and greased it well, give it a little rock, and there was no effort there. Nice suction noise. It should sink and push down ever so slightly against that cage. Next we have our overrun piston, and we're going to run a little grease around the center, a little grease on the outside, and a little grease inside the forward piston. While I'm greasing this up and getting prepared to drop in, I'll go over a little. If you lose third gear, could have a blown piston down here, unlikely. Forward O-ring tearing at all, or blowing out that piston or losing a check ball, that can affect a lot of gears over time. Forward is the main player. The other gears will take up compensation but will not last long. And then we have the overrun engine braking piston, which the easiest thing to do here is use the bevel, get both your hands in there, rock it and twist it, and it should just drop in pretty much all by itself, and you'll hear that good suction noise. I was dragging the forward up on that, but that's all right. That is our piston assembly. Then we have our spring cage, our return cage, and our clip. This clip's important. Make sure it is not spread out too much. It should be about the thickness of your index finger. And when you're putting it in and taking it out, try not to ruin it. If you do, you must get a new one. Now we go over to the spring compressor, and this is pretty much the last time we'll use that. Alright, so we're basically doing the same thing as we've done before with the reverse drum. You know, just place your clip in the center, kind of where you can get to it. Trying to be the best I can be for you guys right now. Give it a firm push down. Don't push too hard, don't bend the cage. This clip is a little challenging. Use your index finger in the rear to help get it down. And you may have to give it a push, but as you can see, it's sunk right in. You're more than welcome to turn it. And there you have it. Assembled drum opening is between the locking tabs. Very, very important. And now we're going to move on to installing the clutches. Onto assembly of the actual clutch packs in the input drum. We have the pistons that apply them, and we're going to find out very shortly how well we did when we go air check. Now, the first thing I want to get out of the way, and that you should want to too, because it's one of the first pieces that goes in right after a few clutches, is the forward sprag. Very important piece, and a great upgrade for this would be a dual cage sprag. Very available, very strong, very good, made by BorgWarner. You can get it anywhere. We're going to just use an OEM one today. Like I said, this is fine if it isn't broken for a daily driver application or something similar. This will work. For a mild street rod, you may want to step up to a dual cage or a heavy hauling truck. Today, we're just using this because we're thinking of the guy at home here. The forward sprag is super important. You lose all gears, or can only go backward, or can only go forward. This might be your common problem. This might have shattered, locked, or clean rolled. Clean roll is going to be, you only have reverse and neutral. A lock, you will not have reverse, you will only have forward. Or completely shattering it in some random fucked up way, you might have a little bit of both. This is your primary player in going forward. And there are three pieces to the little mechanical piece here. We have our hub, our drive gear, and our sprag roller itself. What we want to do is, after our bushings, which there are two, and they go on each end, and we inspect our journals, because this is basically a bearing. Journal there, journal there. You should see some nice cross hatching still. Very nice. We want a little assembly grease. Just a little to lube it. Use your leftovers on the other piece. This will help initially break in the sprag on startup. Now, what we want to do is grab the sprag, grab this, and we're just going to pinch and roll our hand and give it a gentle push. Easy does it. Okay, and these are directional, and I will explain that in a minute. You'll know if you did it right when I get to the actual assembly of it. We're going to set that aside, and we're going to place one of our races on there. We're then going to take our sprag with our hand on our other side, and this is all technique, and we're going to twist it in. Very, very gently. And these are very hard to tell. The dual cages are much easier to tell. But I, in fact, did put it in backwards that first time. You'll know if you put it in backwards as well, because what should be is you should be able to push and roll it back and twist it in. On the front side, this should lock, turning this drive gear only, should lock both. It should free spin counterclockwise for reverse and lock clockwise. This is how you know you've done it right. If you've done it in reverse, you will definitely know it because you will not go forward. Then we put our other race on. hub and our snap ring. Position does not matter. Try to keep it between the 2 points. So to recap, free spin counter, locking clockwise. This is correct. Now we set that aside, we're almost ready to put that in. Sprag bearing coming over to the input drum for the rest of this assembly. We have our sprag bearing, and that simply gets placed right on top of that lube seal. Go ahead and throw a little transmission oil on there if you are building a new unit. If you're not, you might as well anyway. It's good to always have lube. Now, we have 2 overrun steels, an overrun apply, and 2 overrun clutches. This is the orientation. Overrun steel, also known as engine braking. Overrun clutch, overrun clutch, and overrun apply. Now is the point with our bearing and those clutches in, we shake this sprag past those 2 clutches. Very easy to do, and you definitely don't want to try it with the next set we're putting in. It will take you quite a while. This is our forward clutch pack. This is on all the time, and we start with a wave plate. It's the only wave in the input drum, and then a steel. That cushion plate should be there, or you will have a very hard engagement from park to drive or park to reverse. It can break. I've never really seen it happen, but if you have a hard engagement from P to D, that possibly could be the problem. And then we follow up with a clutch. Again, your clutches are your preference, and I just can't stress enough, we all love fancy red clutches. Red's supposed to be awesome, but red is actually for drag racing only. It's not a great clutch for the street. There are 5 steels, 5 clutches. It is possible to fit 6 like I have, but it's very, very difficult to do, and I don't recommend it unless you're doing a trans brake like we do. And then we end with a forward apply plate. Now, if you've done this correctly and you fit 5 clutches, 5 steels, 1 wave, and 1 apply plate with the sprag, this should be relatively flush with that first set of lugs. And this is your snap ring for it. This is the smaller of the 2, and it's very thick and fat. You want this between teeth in an open spot. You never want a snap ring on the edge of a tooth. Simply push that down in there with your fingers, help guide it, and all we're going to do is pry it in place. This doesn't take a lot of effort. Don't be afraid of busting the lugs off. That just doesn't happen. Move your sprag around, shake it, everything should seat, and you should have a fairly good clearance, probably about 20 thousandths to 30 thousandths. That is a beautiful, beautiful forward clutch pack, nice and tight. Our sprag works as intended, forward, reverse, and will perform as it should. Now the big one, third clutch. There are so many ways to do a third clutch. I am doing it the OEM way / I'm giving you a 7th, like some of the better built ones that have been behind heavier trucks, or even the old police packages, they had a 7th clutch. The third apply plate, which must be flat. It's very important to machine that. Just because you think it's flat and it looks flat, it probably isn't, and I promise. Then we go with a clutch. And a steel. Fat tabs through the slots, thin tabs through the wide slot. Clutch, steel. Okay, that is 7. It is very doable to fit 8. which is what we do, but it is not really recommended. 7 is available in most kits, and it is perfectly fine. Now, I haven't pre-done this clearance for once. I kind of did it on the fly, and this is exactly what you're going to be looking for. If you've done this right with a good clearance, and what I've used is, I believe, 6 steels, 2 apply plates, and 7 clutches. My clearance is going to be very good, probably 20 thousandths. It's flush with our teeth, just like forward. That's just a little trick and a little tip from me to you. We take this off, and we get to see what our clearance is really like. Do not neglect these. The OEM way is putting them in the other way. I like to do it this way. I think it is just a little bit better. They operate the same way. The apply plates squish together, and these push them apart. Not too critical. Some people leave them out. I disagree with it. It prevents centrifuge. When you're in other gears, this drum's still turning, and it's going to apply those clutches ever so slightly and burn them slowly over time. These help prevent that. Watch out for cores that do not have them in it, or builds that do not use them. Now we put our snap ring in. Again, very important to stay away from the teeth. Little finger work, give a push down, use your thumbs, push with your wrist. And my little screwdriver can do the rest of the job. Now, what we've got here, as you can see, is a gorgeous, gorgeous clearance. I'm going to just guesstimate it is about 20 thousandths, as we usually do. I've just been doing this a long time and built thousands of units, so it just kind of comes natural when you've been doing it this long. This is not required. The shorter the clearance, not past 20, don't go above 20. Don't make this tight. That should spin just like that, no matter what. The bottom should turn freely. GM's clearance is huge. I don't even remember what the number is, but I think it's around 80 thousandths. That's massive. That causes the scarring and premature wear of your clutches, and really poor quality shift timing. Try to minimize the gap. 40 thousandths, if that's all you can get, that's more than acceptable. You've over 50% made that better than what GM did. 20 is very ideal and absolutely gorgeous. You can just see that little thump. So I just want to marvel at that a minute, soak it in, make sure that's what you got. Now, we're going to finish it off by air checking our drum and putting on our sealing rings. And then the input drum is complete. So what I want to do, we'll talk about air checking for a second. This lets you know if you screwed up a seal or didn't do something quite right, namely tearing something. What you want is a little transmission fluid around the base and around your check ball area. Ignore the blind bleed, air is going to come out of there anyway. The first hole, overrun, air is going to shoot out the forward hole behind me, and it does. Forward should hold pressure. Should sound just like that. Real good tight seal. Third clutch will bleed a little bit, but it should be relatively firm and solid. That's the sound of the blind bleed. That's a nice seal. No fluid or air coming out this check ball, and no air bubbles coming out around that shaft. Extremely, extremely critical, guys. Air coming around that shaft, big no bueno. That means the center is going to strip out and you will stop moving the same instance as you would, losing the forward sprag. This little tool is called a ring sizer to finish off our little build of the input drum. It is expensive. There are other ways to do it. I've seen people use a Bud Light can, zip ties. Get creative, guys. You'll figure it out. These are available online though. This is an adapted case if anybody wants the one I have. This is all timing and skill. We put our first solid sealing ring on, the further down the land is, the more you let it stretch out in size on the bottom of this, it gets wider. So we're going to go down and just creep and crawl, and once we get it down there, we're going to pinch it tight, help it size in. Now, what I recommend beginners do is do one at a time, not all four. So once you got it sized pretty good, slowly but firmly put your sizer on. Do not force it. You should have a nice size sealing ring like that. Now we go on to the third one. We're going to use a little less time, and we're going to go down and just crab walk it to its little home. Pinch, and we'll do, and you should go down on that fourth one, etc., 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 etc. There's my stutter, progressively as you go. Now I'm just going to do the last two because I'm like just a little bit impatient. Pinch, first one, no time at all, just slip that sucker on there. Pinch. Sometimes you need to move them in and adjust it. If you're doing it like I am right now, be leery. Be ready to pull up so you don't smash another ring when it pops. There you have it. All that's left is a cherry on top. This is your end play washer. This is a 69. We have a selection usually from 67 to 72. End play is not too critical in the 60 like it is the other units. End play washer, I flipped the bearing. We're not going to talk about that today. It's not something I encourage other people to do because there's a reason behind it. This is the OEM way. It sits right on top right there. And there you have it, guys. The input drum is tight, sealed, functioning. It's got a primo clearance, which is what I want you guys to strive for. And we're ready to move on to something you guys have been waiting for me to do forever, the valve body. Then we're going to assemble up next.